really focused on organizational development, employee engagement, performance management, leadership development, those more strategic pieces of HR, and have really found that I enjoy the consulting side, where you can go into an organization and develop some quick relationships and kind of become a strategic partner to the HR group there or the leadership group there, and provide them with tools and resources and insights that they can then become the champions of within their company. So that's kind of where Dawn and I have crossed paths in our career. In her last position, I came in and did some leadership development training, and I think you've been to a conference or two of mine. And so when she called me and we talked about what you guys were looking for, it sounded right up my wheelhouse. I work with a lot of nonprofit, government facility, municipality organizations. Most recently, and I think you did a reference to the third Judicial District in Minnesota. That's the 11 counties down in the Rochester-Winona area. And I worked closely with their district administrative team, as well as their court administrators and their court supervisors. So it was a similar setup where they were in multiple different locations, multiple different departments, but looking at the organization as a team. And so I talked to Dawn about some of the objectives that you guys were hoping for, and it sounded like getting a insight into some turnover issues was a priority, and really getting a feel for the employee experience. And when we talk about employee engagement, that is driven by the employee experience. And I don't mean experience of how many years they've been doing this. I mean what they experience when they come in every day. And I talk about that as kind of a, if you've ever seen Mercury, how Mercury kind of changes and flows, and when you touch it, it moves this direction. Employee engagement and culture and employee experience are the same thing. It's always changing, it's always moving, and it's relatively point in time. So what I recommended that we take a look at, so that you can get better insights on what is that employee experience and how is that driving our performance and our turnover and or retention. And so I made two upfront recommendations, and the first would be that we do an employee engagement survey based on criterion validated questions that provide predictive evidence-based data. And an engagement survey is a good tool. No survey is a great tool. And I talk about an employee engagement survey being like when, and I feel like I'm talking, when your child or a niece or a nephew comes up and says, I just don't feel good. The first thing we do is we put our hands on their forehead. And in doing that, it gives us information, but it doesn't diagnose what's wrong with the child. It doesn't provide treatment options. It doesn't make them feel good. It doesn't cure what's ailing them. It's just a point of reference information. And to me, that's similar to what an employee engagement survey is. It gives you point in time information about how employees feel, what they think and feel about the work they do. So that's good, but it's just a start. So I also recommend that after that, or at the same time, we also do what I call point of view interviews. And the point of view interview tells you more about why they feel the way they do. So the survey tells you what, and it gives you a reference of predictive, is there a fever or isn't there a fever? The POV interviews, point of view interviews, is more of the diagnosis. It's more of the getting a feel for what's working that we want to do more of, and what are some of the things that maybe are having a negative impact that we want to take a look at. So in those point of view interviews, I would meet with a sampling of the employees, and depending on the size of the organization, that sampling can range in size. Looking at you guys and how diverse you are and how split out you are, I think we might want to take a fairly large sampling to make sure that we incorporate each team and multiple perspectives from each team. And I would sit down, and it's usually 20 to 25 minutes with each individual, and I have 4 standard questions that I ask them, but I also encourage them to take the conversation where they need it to go, short of throwing anyone under the bus. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in personal vendettas. I'm interested in the things that impact work every day. So I allow them to stretch the conversation, but not to go into that real negative zone. I then take that, the survey gives us the quantitative information. The point of view interviews gives us more of the qualitative, where I can make summaries based on trends I hear, based on common stories or common themes that I hear, and I will put that up against the qualitative and the quantitative and put that into an executive summary to present here or wherever you choose. I will come in and help explain that, as well as provide you a written document that you can share with whomever you think is necessary. Again, that will help you understand point in time, what your employees are thinking and feeling and why they're thinking and feeling that, but it does not provide any treatment. So if you do this and you find out that there's a fever, and then you get the thermometer and you find out there's a temperature of 104, that's information. That's what we're doing. We're not moving on and providing any interventions at this point, but I would recommend that if you do this work, that you think about how are we going to respond, how are we going to share this information, and what interventions could be realistic. Because just having the information is good, but it doesn't move your dial. And sometimes I've seen employees, when they go through this process, they think, wow, wonderful, they're really interested in my insight and my input. If they don't see anything result from that, there can be, some emotions that are tied to that as well. Some employees may think, well, they wanted to hear what I had to say, but then they didn't care what I had to say. So there's some risk in getting the information and not taking action. What questions do you have?
I have a question.
Sure.
When you do the interviews, there's several departments, and people might be reluctant to be honest or share. How do you keep, let's say there's a few people in one department, and there's quite a few in another. Well, quite a few, a person is part of a large number, but a small department. How do you keep it so people feel more, it's confidential, or
Yep.
it's not going to reflect on them negatively if they're honest with you, etc.?
That's a very good question. And with the engagement survey, it is completely anonymous. We can set it up to where, if it's an electronic response, that we don't know who triggered that electronic response. We do it through a service that I have that has no indicators. We can put as many demographic identifiers on that as we feel appropriate. For example, if we want department, and you have a department that only has 2 people, that's a little telling. So we can make those adjustments. So that we can pretty much guarantee total anonymity. I don't promise confidentiality, because I'm going to share the information, but that's anonymous. On the POV interviews, it's a little slipperier. What I tell the individuals when they come in is that I would like them to be as open and honest as they're comfortable. I tell them, if you're not comfortable, please indicate that to me so that I can understand. And then what I tell them is I, number one, probably don't even know their name. If I did, I'm not good at remembering names. And I'm going to ask that you tell me when I have an appointment, but don't tell me the name of who that is. And I do take notes, and I am going to share stories. The only way that identity would come out is if it was a very particular story. that might be an identifier. So I let folks know there's not as much anonymity on the POV side, but I'm not going in to say who said what. I'm just going in to share what I've heard. So I have a printout that we give to the employees ahead of time so that they know that when they first get involved. And if we find that the POV data that we're collecting is very different than the engagement data, we can maybe assume that we do have some of that trust issue going on where they felt they couldn't be as honest.
Shane?
I apologize for being late. So is your survey already created?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not developed specifically for organization?
No, and let me tell
Okay.
you why. Because for surveys to be what we call predictive, and that's what you want a survey, because if you go out to the public and say, our employees are engaged, the public's gonna go, who cares? But if you can go out and say, because our employees are engaged, they're gonna provide better service, higher quality, they're gonna be safer on the job, that's the predictive stuff that we want. So people who are much smarter than I am have done all of the algorithms and the research to determine what survey questions are predictive of performance, things like safety, accuracy, productivity, those types of things that are really the goal. Does that make sense?
It does. I just want to make sure it includes, because sitting on the city council, I want to know if I'm failing the employees, failing managers, and vice versa, if our management is failing our employees
Okay.
also. And I think that's maybe some of the perceived culture around here.
Okay.
And I want to make sure that's identified if that's something that
And I think
people believe.
that's something that we would address more on the point of view interviews.
Well, that's right.
Yep. Yep.
And that's where I think the breakdown in the process is going to fall there, because you're not going to get that honesty.
Okay.
I don't believe you are.
Okay. I have found in the organizations I work with that, and this is going to sound self-promoting, but that's what I'm here to do, that one of my strengths is helping set an environment that is safe. I've gone into many organizations that have very high-level trust issues, and believe it or not, almost the opposite happens. People feel like, finally I have an opportunity to voice my opinion, and I get more than we bargained for. Now, that may not happen here. If we find that people are coming in and just saying, yep, nope, I may come back to this committee with recommendations that we do something else to try and get that information. And I want to interview all different levels so that we can compare the supervisor experience to the employee experience and see if there's a gap there. If at that point we find that we're just not getting enough data, we can look at other options.
Okay.
But I understand your concern.
What are your 4 questions that you have for the interview?
My 4 questions. The first one is, how do we, and I use the term we very deliberately, because I want the employee to tell me what their concept of we is, because usually they're like, well, what do you mean, my team or the city, and we talk about that. So how do we define success is the first question, and that's about alignment, vision, purpose, and contribution. The second question is, how do we know we're successful? So that's about really performance, recognition, understanding, and contribution. The third one is, what are our strengths? What are we really good at? So that we can find out what do we need to do more of that we're actually is driving success. And then the last one is, what gets in our way of being as successful as we want to be?
See, I like the interview because depending upon the responses, then you could drill down.
Yep.
Like if someone gives a specific response that you would like to drill down, can you
Yep.
give me more specifics? Then you have some data that we could deal with. So,
Sometimes I even find that once I ask the first question, they answer the other ones before I even get there.
Yeah.
Although when you're dealing with humans, it's never an absolute science, but I have done a lot of studying, and I've been trained a lot in the psychology of interviewing and motivational interviewing. So I can kind of tell when someone's hesitant or maybe going down an avenue that we might not want them to, and I'm trained on how to bring them back to those.
You mentioned data. What's the, in your experience, what's the level of engagement that's a successful sample size? Both in the interview and you talked about, I don't know if I wrote it down, but yeah, both in both settings, the survey and the...
Again, it depends upon the size and the structure of the organization. Excuse me. On the survey side, I like to shoot for 80% response. Some organizations make it mandatory. So then you get a higher response, but you might not be getting as genuine of a response. So there's a give and take there. But I think anything 70, 75 is valid. On the point of view interviews, I don't necessarily strive for a number, but I strive for a comprehensive. And that's different based on each organization. So say you have a department that has 100 employees and a department that has 5. I'm probably going to want to interview all of the 5 in the smaller department and maybe 20 in the department of 100. So it's not necessarily just a percentage, it's a comprehensive approach. And we want to make sure that we hit all departments unless there's specifically a department that you want to exclude for a specific reason.
Going through this, you said that you'll go through the steps to see if we have a problem, but you don't necessarily offer the solution to the problem?
I can. From what I understand, that's not the scope that you're at right now.
Okay.
Honestly, that's a pretty critical part because once employees feel like they have a voice, they like to know the impact of that voice. So I highly encourage you to give thought to, once we have this, then what's the next step? Because if you don't do anything with that data, you're missing opportunities, but you can also be creating some concerns.
Okay, so you answered, that's perfect then. Yep, thank you. Sue, you got anything? Tom?
I would like to add something.
Yeah.
So to your point and to kind of touch on and expand what you just said, I think action plans after in some form is absolutely necessary, to your point, so employees don't think, well, geez, they really don't care, right? They took a survey, they did all these interviews, we took our time and they did nothing. But I think what you do depends on what you find out. So, training, if you're seeing that maybe managers need some more training, then that's the direction. If you see communications, maybe that's something different. Maybe that's developing a communication model, but I think it's very hard to commit to a specific before you can diagnose what the issue is.
Right. And part of my executive summary will be intervention recommendations, and they will be just as heavy on what we should continue to do or do more of. It'll be strengths-based as much as it will be change-based or service-based. Because you guys aren't failing, so we want to find out what's working just as much as we want to find out what's not working.
Anyone else?
I guess maybe another question. I think we all could probably, could have 8 different opinions from the city council, and there's maybe management staff in terms of what we want to diagnose or what we want to get to the heart of. I guess it's more maybe for a question for the committee, Dawn, maybe everyone in the room. How are we going to define the characteristics of success for this? And either this service or another or whatever. I guess I'm trying to make sure I get my arms around beginning with the end in mind and making sure that we're setting ourselves up for something that I think I've said before is actionable, that gleans certain information. I mean, I support, I guess, what I'm hearing here, and we haven't met Sarah, but I think, I just want to make sure that we're beginning with a success criteria that when we walk away from this, we'll say it was time well spent. because we don't have a lot of time to waste on these types
And
of things.
that's an excellent point, and I would really encourage you to have that what's the outcome we're looking for discussion. And from what I understand from Dawn is that we're really looking for information that will help us drive an outcome of increased retention, increased productivity, team cohesion, and overall, just satisfaction and being an advocate for your organization within the community. So once I get the information, if those are still the outcomes that you're looking for, I can make suggestions on how do you take what we've learned and head in the direction of what your outcomes are to be. And you guys can have that conversation. They may still be retention and service oriented, or they may have changed.
Yeah, I think it's be healthy for maybe everyone that
Yep.
is passionate about this piece of work, that we maybe hear from everybody.
The data of the survey is predictive of productivity, talent retention, safety, and customer retention or customer service. So if those are your outcomes, that data is predictive of that behavior.
Steve? So do you have one survey, or do you have like an a la carte thing where if you're looking for this, we can pull in this?
I have one survey that I have chosen as the most predictive of those outcomes, again, based on work done by people much smarter than myself. It's supported by a lot of science and research. I am often asked, can we add questions? We can, but what happens is the questions that we do ask are called criterion validated, which means that they have been proven to really elicit a response that is related to certain criteria. Now, we can ask questions that we're curious about, but there isn't the science behind us to tell us that it has an impact one way or another. What I'm not willing to do, and I'll explain why, is have a comment section. That's kind of why I do the point of view interviews. Because I found when you have a comment section, number one, it tends to skew your data because people instantly think, great, here's my opportunity to get everything off my chest. So they're in that frame of mind when they answer the questions. And number two, I've had comment sections come back with things like, my coworkers are stealing, or I'm being sexually harassed, or whatever. And if it's anonymous, you can't do anything about it, so then you have a problem. Because you're mandated to address it, but you don't know how. So those are the types of things that we want employees to bring to you personally, not save up for comments on a survey. Does that answer your question? So we can add questions that you're curious about, but again, they won't have that criterion validated science.
I guess I'm not looking for that. I just didn't know if there's, obviously you have one niche area that you subscribe to, and obviously there's other organizations that have other
Yep.
other things. So I didn't know if we were looking for certain, to answer certain questions within our organization, if you had an a la carte, well, we can use this survey and this survey, compile them together to
I
get what
would
we're looking
encourage
for.
you to think about what are the other pieces of information you would want to get, and I can surely focus on those in the point of view interviews as well, and be mindful for when I hear things that are related to that and dig in that area.
And I guess, I don't know if the committee or what conversation you guys have had of what we are looking for, because that's something that we have not discussed,
Okay.
I guess specifically on what we're actually looking for,
Okay.
or if you have ideas of, I guess I don't know what the questions are to ask, like, okay, we want to find out about some of the things that you have brought up about employee retention, job satisfaction, those type of things. So I guess I don't know.
Maybe you want to go into a little bit of the domains without giving away the questions.
Okay,
That might be helpful.
there are 4 areas, and this is just the survey piece. There are 4 areas, and they each have a question based on the we and the me. Because employee engagement is experienced as a personal, I always say engagement is in the eye of the beholder. So it starts with me and my thoughts and feelings, but it's also influenced by my team, So there's an area that's about purpose, that has a question about me and my role within that, and then there's a question about us as a we, what's our contribution to purpose, because purpose is linked to commitment and engagement and performance. There's a section about excellence, there's a section about future, and then there's a section about like my values, my coworkers, the value piece. All of those are related to the things that I've heard you say, like retention, satisfaction, a relationship with management. Those are all pieces of that puzzle.
Yeah, that's my concern, like the mayor said, if we go through this and at the end of it, we don't have the answers we're looking for, or, because obviously without knowing the questions ahead of time, how do we know at the end that's what we've been looking for?
Okay.
That's my concern, is that if we sign up to do this, is that as we go through the survey, and we get to the end, and if we've done with a million other surveys in this community over the years, we've put on the shelf because it really wasn't what we're interested in hearing, or didn't answer what we were looking for.
Okay.
And that's my other.
I think your second one is really important. Didn't answer what we were looking for.
Okay.
The first one is it didn't tell us what we wanted to hear. I think we have to be open to hearing whatever it is it tells us.
Yep.
But we have to make sure that it is actually measuring what we want it to measure.
Yep.
And what I heard from the team is we really want to measure work climate, work environment. And that crosses a lot of boundaries. One that I'm hearing you say is really important, and you're right, it's critical, is the relationship with supervision or management or leadership.
I want to make sure that employees feel that we're staying on the edge of technology, and those type of things too. That our equipment is new and usable, and we're not driving around with cars with rusted holes in them and things like that. Those kind of things.
And that'll come out pretty clearly in the point of view interviews. I work with organizations. I worked with South Dakota DOT. I work with a lot of hospitals. Those are the things that usually come up first. It's about, do I have the tools I need to do my job? So that's usually a pretty clear message that comes through. It's sometimes the tougher messages about how I feel, and the people I work with that take a little longer to dig out.
But those are important, because
Yep.
obviously you want to have a good relationship with your coworkers.
Yep, absolutely.
Management.
We have 3 employees here. How do you feel from what you heard? I mean, the thing is, we can talk all we want, but you don't represent the employees, but you represent yourself. And what do you think of the concept? And
I've been involved with temperature gauging before with previous employers, and I think it's really good to get the employees' feedback and get involved. However, to your point, if you don't take action, the whole thing was pointless. It's a waste of time, money, and resources that we really don't want to waste. So.
What do you think?
I don't want to put you on the spot, but at least just your thoughts.
Well, I agree. Somebody hit it on the head. I mean, over the years, we've done a number of these, and for whatever reason, nothing comes of them. There's no follow-up for whatever reason.
What would you hope to see if we did it again?
This is all kind of new to me.
Okay.
This is a little bit of a surprise. I don't know what's driving this.
It's a referral from me.
So would you be really interested in hearing the feedback so that we provide to you what we heard? Would you be really interested in being a part of deciding what do we do with that? Or would you just want to hear, here's the actions we're going to take based on what we found?
I think the question's been asked. What are we looking for?
Okay.
Maybe all of the above.
Okay. What about you?
Well, I think as a manager, that's one of the things that you want to hear is what your staff says, they're missing, as long as it's not I guess, excuse my frankness, a bitch session, You don't get anything that's accountable out of that because they're just mad because they didn't get their way or whatever,
Yep.
So especially as a young manager, that's what you want to hear is what can I do differently, and you have, especially in my work group, I have a diverse staff. You know, I have guys that have been here for 30 years, and I got people that have been here for 2 years, you know, and so perspective is completely different, and it's nice to hear what the difference is, so.
So would you be interested in actually being a part of the action plan, or do you want somebody to come in and say, here's what we heard and here's some suggestions of what to do with that? What would you want to see as the next step after we gain the insights?
Well, I think it should be both, right? I mean, because obviously, my supervisor or the alderpersons are gonna give direction based on what they heard, you know, and it might mean that I have to continue education or whatever to figure out how to communicate to somebody differently or whatever, you know, so I think he'd be part of both of it.
Can I ask you another question?
Sure.
What do you think the chances are that people will be readily open and honest?
Oh, I think they'll be open and honest.
Good.
If you can get them to do it.
Okay.
That's gonna be the trick to this.
Okay.
It's like I said, I mean, we've done over the years, and pretty much it's another one of these.
Okay. That's
Well,
fair.
When was the last time that we did something like this? I mean, it hasn't been in my time here,
It was part of the Russell study.
where we did.
Well, there was
yeah.
the Russell study,
So that'd be
but
16
it
years.
doesn't have to be this necessarily. We started our, the Lean Six program or whatever. And that's pretty much been inactive for quite a while, so it doesn't have to be just this.
So it sounds like there's a flavor of the month syndrome.
No, I don't think so. It just seems
No?
to come around every once in a while. It's not
Okay.
frequent, it doesn't seem to be frequent, but
Well, and maybe we set it up that's a good thing, because things do change. What I'm hearing, though, is when we've done it in the past, it hasn't turned into anything. So if we're gonna do it again, it's a good thing we're doing it again, because we wanna learn what's changed since the last time we've done it, but we don't wanna let it sit on a shelf, like you said.
I mean, the last one was really large scale though, like Sue brought like 16 years ago or whatever that was.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
it
before my
included,
time, and I've been here 17
yeah,
years, so.
it included residents, businesses, employees, from top to bottom. It was
Okay,
very
so it was more of
involved.
a community needs type assessment.
It was all the way from having 19 aldermen going down to 8. You know, it was very encompassing of everything,
Okay,
from employee satisfaction to community member satisfactions of businesses to.
well, what I can
Very
tell you is,
involved.
every 16 years isn't enough.
No, I agree. You know. Well, I think Jake
But
brought up
this
that
this won't be that.
some
that
companies do it every
comprehensive.
year.
Yep.
They do a survey.
And that's actually really important, because the data that we collect now is more of a benchmark than anything, because you don't necessarily have anything to compare it to short of 16 years ago. So if we come in and on one of the questions we get a score of 50, what does that mean? We don't know, because we don't have a reference. But we can take each of the questions and reference them against each other. So we can look at, here's our areas of strengths, here's our areas that aren't so strong. But you will want to continue to do this in the future so that you can see the trending, because that's where the real impact is. If you can improve your engagement, that's where it's predictive of improved outcomes.
Sarah, I got a question or two
Sure.
for you. Have you done any type of survey like this with any other cities? I mean, I see that you've done some hospitals and some community projects, but anything?
Not cities specifically, like I've done the county region, I've done municipalities, I've worked with cities, but not on a survey.
Okay.
I've worked with the city of Mankato with helping their supervisors impact their survey data, but they already had done a survey.
Okay. And then my next question I have for you is, from the time the employee surveys go out and then going through the point of view interviews, what is the time frame start to finish that all that have, like on average, to get that done?
When, let's say we cut off the survey on a Friday, I can have the data to you by the next Friday. Point of view, it takes longer to do than it does to summarize, because I can start to see the themes evolve as we go through that. So I like to say that you will have an executive summary within 2 weeks. of finishing those POV interviews. Because what I've seen in other organizations that is a real setback is when you do this work and you don't get the information until 6 months later. But that's not relevant. So I like to get back to the organization. Scheduling is always a challenge, but as soon as possible, hopefully within 2 weeks.
Okay.
It's the point of view interviews that take the most time.
Paul?
Just being that you said that we haven't really done the survey with municipalities before, is there any concern, or even Dawn, any concern with you just thinking about our organization? Obviously, we have different types of work classes, right? I mean, we have administrative staff that's virtually working here in City Hall versus a police department union versus a firefighting union, you know, and versus our work group, you know, I guess different trades and stuff like that, about getting answers that are skewed towards those different work classes.
The research behind this is very neuroscience based, so it's about human nature. But if there are specifics between departments that we want to tap into, we can do one of two things. We can identify department or class or whatever demographically for the survey, so that we can compare administrative to field or to police, and we can look at them differently. It's how you look at the data, not how your profession impacts that. The second thing we can do is you can kind of give me a heads up on what are the differences that we're going to see in those point of view interviews, and then I can either validate that or help, you know, say that might be a tribal myth or whatever.
Is this something where you give a login and people can move on
Mhm.
electronically and take care of that?
Yep. And if they don't have access electronically, we can do it by paper. Again, that's less anonymous, but we'll protect anonymity as much as possible.
Well, and I hope that the council can direct department heads to allow time for this to be completed during work time.
Yeah, the survey is probably all of 5 to 7 minutes. The point of view interviews, I usually block off a half an hour. And I will highly, highly, highly request that point of interview is paid time, because you'll get into a little, difficulty if it's not.
I think it's too hard to track, having it on paper.
Legally, it should be paid time.
Honestly.
Go ahead, Joe.
I guess just, I would rather see the department heads and their, their immediate subordinates get behind this more than council even, because they're the ones that are really gonna be impacting
Absolutely.
day-to-day operations of the city. We don't really, we just make decisions mostly over budget or policy, so.
But it does have an effect.
Of course, it does, but we change, and hopefully you have a manager who's there for, 20 years, 20 plus years, so.
Here's what I completely agree with you, because the supervisor, the team lead, whoever that is the one that's really going to have the biggest impact on moving the dial. What I've seen organizations do that hasn't been successful, that I would encourage you to shy away from, is to take this data departmentally and say, okay, supervisor, here's your data, now figure out what to do. Because if they knew what works, they'd already be doing it. So they're going to need resources and support to figure out what is the plan of action. You're absolutely right, they're the ones to lead that plan of action. But organizations that depend on their managers to come up with that action plan, they just don't have the insights in the background they'll do what's noble, they might not do what's effective.
Sure.
That leads me to a question. Rather than being top-down, should we have supervisors, either through a memo or meeting or whatever, just share this initiative? So it's not like, well, the Common Council wants to do it, now we have to do it. Just to get a feeler out to see, hey, this is what they have in mind, this is the purpose of it. And before we give final approval, one of those.
Like, here, do this before you go home.
Yeah, one of those, it's just food for thought.
I think that should definitely be a part of the communication. I think the decision to do it or not do it needs to probably be at this level.
Oh, yeah.
And if you decide to do that, then Dawn and I can work on how do we help the managers and supervisors communicate around this, which will mean we need to educate them first. We need to solicit their buy-in. And I have some of those tools and resources that I've used with other organizations. We can make a video, we can, have a meeting, we can do whatever makes sense on the culture of your organization, because those are the folks that are going to get the direct questions. So you're absolutely right. They need to be able to understand what's going on and be the champion to roll that out. And we can put together the tools to help them do that.
We've heard, and it was a great discussion we've had, we have good insight now. But the bottom line, it says on the agenda approval. I mean, what's the cost? I mean, we haven't talked about
Yep.
that.
For this
I mean, if
this
there's a
piece would be
follow-up.
$5,000.
Okay.
That includes everything from today to the executive summary.
And a follow-up where,
The executive summary would be the follow-up. Yep.
what action?
In the executive summary, I will have recommendations.
Okay.
If you would choose to engage me for those recommendations or those interventions, that would be a new proposal.
Oh, okay, that's, all
Yep.
right.
I guess I want to be clear too. I do have that in the HR budget, just so, I'm just going to throw it out so
Okay.
we're aware.
We started with that big of a proposal, and Dawn and I realized that we needed to take it step by step, for the very reason that you talked about, what's the end in mind?
All right.
And we just don't know right now other than this piece. But the real meat and potatoes and moving of the dial comes in the interventions and the solutions that you implement, which is very heavily focused on the team lead.
Well, based on what we've heard today, I believe Sarah has a very good handle on doing this survey. I mean, we've discussed this, that we wanted to have somebody professionally design one as opposed to doing a homemade one. So looking at some of the projects she's done, I think that this would be pretty tried and true, and with the interviews that are going to take place after it, I think any other issues that are out there would probably be snuffed out or brought up to light. I just want to make sure that we do this right, because I'm going to look at this as an investment in the city, an investment in our employees. So I would make a motion to accept the proposal from Ideation Consulting to provide the employee survey as presented, and upon conclusion of the surveys, the executive summary comes back to the Human Resources.
Would you like me to excuse myself for your vote?
No, you
Okay.
can stay here. No, that's fine. Upon conclusion of the survey, the executive summary comes back to the HR committee for discussion.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and second on the floor. Is there any further discussion on the item?
Just one question. Reasonable travel expenses is mostly just mileage, I'm guessing? Okay,
In hotel.
okay,
Yep. Yeah, I'm not going to fly here.
okay.
I wish I could, but I don't think that it'd probably take longer.
Yeah, probably the wait.
All right, motion second, any other further discussion? All right, with all that, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Thank you very much for your time.
I will work with Dawn on a schedule. I am obligated with other clients until April 1st, and then my schedule opens up pretty quickly, so we can get started relatively, and hopefully by then it'll stop snowing too, so.
Just to let you know, we have elections coming up in April. And
Okay.
we may have some turnover on the council, but the mayor redecides the committee, so you may have a different committee when you come back after April.
Great.
By chance.
I'll leave it up to you anytime after April 1st that makes sense for you guys. So we'll be in contact. Thank you. I'm going to excuse myself so I can get ahead of the storm.
Sarah?
Yes.
And it does need final approval from full council, just. so-
Okay,
Yeah.
That's on the 19th.
that's fine. Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Drive safely.
Can I keep this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, the next item is discussion and or approval for proposed, can't talk today, for proposed changes to the city's current retirement policy for employees to provide advance notice of their retirement date. This was a referral from me, and let's start with Dawn.
Sure. Okay, so there's an executive summary in your packet, and it's entitled Executive Summary Retirement Referral. And I think we've stated this before, I just want to reiterate, there are, at times, HR is not aware of in advance of a retirement. It does create a very short recruiting window for us, so it leaves the department short. I think there's definitely a likelihood then of incurring overtime that maybe if we were a little more proactive, we would not have to incur that overtime. So I had started by asking other cities what they did, what their policies look like and what they did. So the city of Wausau responded to me that they require a 90-day advance written notice. If they don't receive that conversion of the sick leave, they use that conversion similar to what we do to pay for that health insurance. If they don't receive that conversion is actually delayed. So that doesn't necessarily right away then convert to dollars. They found that to be effective. The city of Marshfield does not differentiate between when people terminate versus when people retire. They simply ask for a 2-week notice for hourly and a 4-week notice for salaried individuals. If they do not receive that proper notice, they do not pay out vacation. I guess I don't necessarily favor the stick approach. I would like to find a middle of the ground, if you will, and find a way that we can get some advance notice in working with our employees. I think that's probably the best approach to take. And I did ask employees to come and share their opinions or some of their views. I have one here, so I'm going to pick on him if he doesn't mind.
Nope, I don't mind. First of all, what is the policy now?
So I don't think that we have an absolute policy on giving notice. I know that at times we don't receive any notice, and our first notice is when we receive the Wisconsin Retirement System letter, and sometimes by that time the employees are actually gone. I would be in favor of having a policy that has a 30-day notice, but I guess I want individuals to tell me, is there a reason why maybe we wouldn't provide some type of notice? Or, I think we had talked about personal days and floating holidays.
Jay, I think the policy is managers approve time off. And when managers approve time off, that turns into a run out of their benefits. The managers are not notifying HR that this is likely going to be a retirement or a term situation. So I think that's the policy, is that the vacation time or the pay time off is approved by the managers. And sometimes there's not a recognition that it's maybe going to result in a retirement. So I think that's the policy we don't want to lose sight of, is that the managers have the discretion around when vacation is, time off is taken. And a lot of times that communication or the awareness of it is not being shared for recruitment purposes.
Well, I guess with that being said, I think probably up until within the last year, my first phone call probably would have been to HR to let them know. Paul would know. Paul and I agree. But it's, and I've talked to Dawn about this. It used to be that we had our vacation our time off that we were accruing for next year. We could run that out, and it's no secret. What it did is gave us an extra amount of health insurance, is what it did. I understand why we're not doing that anymore, but what's the policy right now with floating holidays, sick leave?
So once you actually give your notice, the current policy is that you cannot then use the personal days and the floating holidays. I guess what I would propose is, if you could give a 30-day notice, by all means, you can use those floating holidays and that personal time.
What happens? Let's say I use my floating holidays, personal days at the beginning of this year and retire at the end of the year. What happens then?
So the
Because I
floating
haven't
holidays,
given
yeah.
notice yet.
Right. Yeah, the floating holidays are gone.
Yep.
You can still use your personal days.
Right, there's no incentive for you, if you've already used
Right.
those
That's correct.
at the beginning, you're not gaining anything because you've already used them up.
I just-
So there's no incentive for you to give any notice. I mean,
Right,
you're
and,
just-
but there's a disincentive for me to use those days, like later in the year, to use those days and not say a word. You know what? Burn up my floating holidays, burn up my,
Right, with the policy as it is now, you're saying, because
Right.
you want to make sure you use them before you give the retirement notice.
right.
And I think what the suggestion is there's no longer going to be that you can use those up to the day you retire. Doesn't matter when you give your notice. You can still, well, I should say, if you can use them in the last 30 days of your, if you give 30 days notice, you can use, at least 30 days notice, you can use it within that time period between your notice period and your retirement date.
But is that incentive enough to give a 30-day notice? Because if I'm gonna retire this year, I already know in my brain and actually as even my personal situation, I've contacted Madison, I've gotten my packet, I already know a date that I'm going to start collecting my retirement in the future, and it's lot longer than 30 days. So I'm going to use, if I had those floating holidays, and I'm going to use those long before that day comes up.
But that was given as a reason of why people aren't giving
Oh,
notice.
okay.
So I think,
Oh,
so I guess what are the other reasons that people,
Yeah, I
I mean, or
don't
what can we do to,
Well, the other big one
notice,
was, is because of the way the accrued vacation, I understand it probably wasn't being handled properly in the past, but the fact is everybody did it, and now nobody does it. So, and it was an extra month of health insurance, basically what it came down to. So,
Well, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We had this conversation, I think, as some managers here and stuff like that, you know, kind of to what Shane's point is that if, and I'll use an individual that has retired from our department, he was, no matter what, because he looked at the dates, he looked at his years of service, he looked at everything, he was gonna retire on February 1st. You know, that's when he was retiring. He wasn't gonna, you know, and so we had previous discussions about, well, is it acceptable or is it not acceptable to have staff, if they have 4 weeks of vacation, use their vacation prior to their retirement date, you know, which was February 1st. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter. If he's gonna work until February 1st, he's gonna work until February 1st, whether he takes his 4 weeks of vacation in the month of January, or if he takes it from the previous year. Those are benefits that he, in my mind, those are benefits that he accrued last year for this year, and it's except for the time that he's earning, you know, in January and February for this year, you know, so I can see paying that out, you know, but like Shane had said, his date is February 1st, so if we say you can't use 4 weeks of vacation prior to retiring, he's gonna take them, you know, in the year of, of 2018 versus now, you know, because it's a benefit that he's already, it's his benefit. You know, it's not something that it's being banked for 2019. It's something that because he worked in 2018, that's what he has. You know, and I guess just as me as a manager, you know, and that's what's happening right now in our department is that people are using their paid time off that they accrued the previous year, you know, in their last month of retirement or last 6 weeks or before retirement, and then they're you know, backing their date up, and this is my last day that I'm working, but I'm going to be here, you know, I'm going to be on the payroll on the books, and then 2 weeks prior to them leaving, you know, well, I really like this being on vacation for a long time, so I'm going to be retired, you know, and so it's typically been 2 weeks before their last date, you know, and so that's where it's not productive, because now you've had 4 to 6 weeks of people on vacation because it's their time that they have accrued off, that, you know, you can't do anything because are they going to go or aren't they going to go is Jay pulling my leg that he's gonna retire, or is he really gonna retire because he hasn't had that communication with you because, you know, of that reason? You know, so if you, in my mind, if a person lets them know 30 days ahead of time, 60 days ahead of time or whatever, they're still here, but they've given us that guarantee that they're not gonna come back after being gone for 6 weeks. We can have that communication, you know, with the mayor, go through the department head process to get the position approved. We can be starting the process of replacing that person, you know, or whatever, and it's my understanding that it's like 45 days prior to their last day that you have to turn in the paperwork to the state anyway, so, so it shouldn't be, you know, whatever that date is, maybe that's what you use, I don't know, I got 20 years yet before I get to that point, so. But it's like something so that we can move down the chain of command, you know, and start the process. Because, you know, for instance, we have in our department, if one position is vacated, we do internal applications for possible promotions. I've had one staff member that left in December and another one that left in February, and because of all the different moves, we're still not through that internal promotions here the middle of March, or first part of March.
And it'll take us another
Probably 3 weeks.
probably, before we know what entry-level position may be open that we're ultimately gonna then post.
Can they cash these days out? Like, I mean, if they have unused personal days or vacation, can
All
they just
the-
take a cash?
So all the
No.
vacation gets paid.
The personal days and floaters don't though. That's why, you know, you have to use them, and that's why people would use them, you know.
Yeah.
Right, they're not paid up. I guess that could
Okay.
be.
But vacation gets paid either way.
Right.
Either you
Okay.
can use it or it gets paid.
So, is this specific to the retirement policy that the personal days don't get paid out? Because if you don't use your personal days now, and you're still working, you do get those paid out at the end of the year.
Right, that's correct.
Right.
So this is just specifically for retirement, correct?
That, yeah, once you've given your retirement notice, you are not eligible to
Okay.
take those benefits.
And then, kind of going back to what Paul was talking about, this vacation piece of it, if I've earned vacation for this year, I can go on vacation and use that vacation, but the vacation that I'm accruing right now for next year, for 2000, after my anniversary,
Right.
that gets paid out, correct?
Correct, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
So maybe would that just be the change to make, just to change the fact that once you announce your retirement, take that out, that you can't use those days?
That's what I'm recommending.
Okay.
I mean, I think really, so if they give their notice, I don't think it would hurt anything to allow them to use the floating holidays in the personal.
And it did come up last time we talked about this. I know there was concern that managers have minimum manning standards that they have to, you know, that they set or whatever. So maybe if you're at minimum on the street department or whatever, someone can't take off, maybe because they're retiring, they'll feel like they're gonna get their day denied. I mean, someone brought that up a month or two ago when we talked about this.
I can't speak for anybody else, but there's a couple times a year, maybe in our department, where you hit that. Christmas is one, maybe a couple weeks in the summertime, and Thanksgiving because of deer hunting. But other than that,
It's odd.
doesn't seem to be an issue.
I know staffing levels are more of a concern at the fire and police department.
Well, maybe that's-
Paul's concern, but.
Well, no,
We could use a few extra
Yeah,
guys
we're-
right now,
we're-
trust me.
it does affect you, you know, I mean, because we are at the bottom, you know, and so, but like I said, if we make this somewhat of an incentive instead of having to be a secretive thing, or what, not secretive thing isn't the right word, right? Because it's all, but so that you know what it is, you can start that process so that when they do finally come off the books, because that's what we always seem to use as a thing, is we're still paying the staff member or whatever, but we can have it in place instead of, you know, starting the the 2-month process or the time period, so I didn't put a date on it because it varies, you know, on the situation. And it could just be a, you know, in some cases, it maybe isn't an overlap, you know.
I don't understand why people just don't, hey, in 6 months I'm gonna retire, and
Yeah.
I just,
Well,
I don't know.
That they hold back, or they have a grudge for something that they hold back. That's what I'm trying to, in my mind, trying to figure out why.
And I think it's quite isolated. I mean, I'm having the conversations with the chiefs and public safety pretty early. When, I mean, those guys know when people are going. I have not had an instance that,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean,
they come down,
maybe it's
like,
boastful.
I've
Maybe
got
they're pretty
2,000
proud
days
they're-
left, you know,
yeah,
like, I
maybe
mean,
they're-
it's.
maybe they're pretty proud.
I'm starting with that.
But DPW seems to be, the street division in particular seems to be just the group that seems to be the rub, and I don't know, or the concern about not being able to provide notice, and that's where I think we got off the rails a little bit around the whole recruitment piece was, recruitment and filling positions, because I was trying to figure out, what are we diagnosing as a problem, you know, and like I said, we don't have, at least to me, we're, you know, part of it is they have an eligibility list, right, in public safety, so maybe there's that, they're always working to build that pipeline, but yeah, I mean, I guess I know who's going in fire and police this year.
I guess I would agree. I
And we're
normally know
planning
who's
for those
going in
replacements.
PD.
I think we need to require a 30-day notice. I think that's just customary. I don't think, you know, the private sector requires it. I've asked a couple of employers, like, what are your policies around it? And I don't know, I won't get caught up in the, what do we feel we should give them personal days or floating holidays or not, but I do think that at a minimum, we do need to require a notice. Not having a notice right now is actually, everyone else is doing, that's, you know, Marshfield is too basic. Obviously, they haven't had an issue there with people not providing notice, otherwise I think it'd be a bit more liberal, or more conservative, requiring more of a notice.
I'll actually make that motion to follow the recommendation in this summary for the 30-day notice, but also eliminating the language, I guess, that prevents the use of those personal days once you announce retirement.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other further discussion?
Yeah, okay, but this says you require a 30-day notice. That's one thing. What happens when you don't? Then the second part of it is, if you provide the 30-day, you can use these things. There's no, I mean, you have to tie the two together, or...
Well, just,
Or do you mean,
I
you're
guess
just
if you-
saying if you don't provide a 30-day notice, you can't use these things, which...
I would prefer personally, I would prefer the language, and I mean, I don't know if we can use it technically, Sue, but I would prefer the language that we don't have to allow you to use those personal days rather than prevent you if you don't, but I would think if you provide a 30-day retirement notice, then you're kind of guaranteed you'll get these days.
Okay, but if I've already used those days,
Right,
and I don't provide a 30-day notice,
You're
what are
not,
you gonna do to me?
nothing.
So then you're not requiring a 30-day notice, because there's no...
Well, all the
I mean,
other
I understand what you're saying, but then it's not... you're not
vacation we have to
requiring
pay out though, I mean,
Well, you could actually change the vacation to have it not
okay.
to be necessarily all, I mean, there's a way to get around that. I wouldn't suggest messing with that really, but, I mean, yeah, that's true. As a policy is right now with vacation, that has to be paid out. But you would have to change your whole vacation benefit to somehow make it not, you know, or have a penalty for,
Personally, if
Yeah.
someone wants to be difficult, I mean, I don't think we can really stop them if that's their intention for whatever reason.
Well, I think we can word the policy to say we are requesting a 30-day notice. Provided that we receive that 30-day notice, individuals can use their floating holidays and personal days.
right. But you're just requesting it, you're not, I'm just saying that...
But I don't think we have a
significance is-
recourse. I mean, if someone gives the notice and they're going November 30th and they've already used that time,
Yeah.
I guess and my intent behind the motion was just it's not necessarily to say, hey, you know, you have to give us this. It's just to kind of take away that incentive not
do it
to.
if they still have it available to them, right?
I guess if that makes sense.
But ideally, I think we'd like everybody to give us,
Sure.
somehow to incentivize it, get everybody to give it at least a 30-day notice.
Jay, you had
I have a question. So is the time of year gonna matter? So, you know, if I say I'm gonna retire on January 5th, I can use my floaters and my personal days versus if I retire in December, which there's a chance I may have used them already anyways, but. So is that incentive for me to hang on for an extra week after the first of the year to get my 5 days?
Possibly.
So, but that's not an issue.
Well, you would still have to give notice though the month before.
Right, I
guess.
understand that, but.
Yeah. And do I think that's gonna happen? Yes. And I don't think, I mean, I think there's different scenarios, right?
Right.
Right. Probably a million different scenarios.
I mean, if you want to make it uniform, it has to be at either a disincentive or an incentive that applies equally to everybody, and not whether you had used certain days at the beginning or not, you know,
So you
so it's a month, I don't want to say a month of health insurance.
Right,
I wouldn't say that,
I
but I mean,
mean,
something where
you got
to
it.
give that,
Five quarters,
or
you wanna
you're not going to
become
get
working
this,
five
and
quarters.
it's something that couldn't have, you know, couldn't have been, so that if the people did use it or take advantage of it earlier, then they still have an incentive or incentive.
Well, if you
I'm sorry,
really
incentive
want,
to do it.
yeah, if you really want a disincentive, then you
Yeah,
say,
no, I
if you've
get it.
used
Give
it,
everyone
you pay back.
required notice and we'll move on.
See,
If you haven't given the 30 days.
Yeah, or I even like the idea of like Sue was, I hate to say a month of health insurance, but there's some
Or something.
incentives, like you give a 30-day notice, you get $1,000, or I don't know what that incentive is, but if you don't, obviously you don't get it, so. Because that's a thing, you know what?
It's tangible.
Versus your floating holidays and all that, where you could have used them, and some people have, some people haven't. This is, you give a 30-day notice, you get this. If you don't get it. That's simple. But what is that? I don't know.
Do you want to amend your motion, or?
Well, I mean, I will amend it. I'm confused now though as to how it should be worded.
And I think ultimately the committee needs to decide what, if you incentivize it for giving a 30-day notice, you get this or you don't get it. You have to come up with that item. Or do you just leave it as is? And I think obviously we want a 30-day notice at least, so you can start your process.
Right, absolutely.
Well, I guess,
I mean,
so just a comment or statement, just within our department, guys are given 2 weeks' notice. And really, in my opinion, 30 days isn't any better than a 2-week notice with what our process is.
Is there any way to speed up your process?
But I don't know what the, so, when do you go down to Madison to get your papers? Is that 45 days or?
You can get your papers a year.
Anytime, but there's, see, the hook to that is you can only do it once a year.
Right.
So, I mean, you have to time this out, you have to be careful when you time this
Yeah,
out.
I think you have to give, is it at least a 45-day notice?
If you want to start collecting
Yeah.
Yeah.
on your
Collect that
retirement.
time.
Right.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
they-
the state doesn't
Do you
care
have to,
either.
Jay, that's just collect on time, isn't it though?
Correct, on time.
Otherwise, you'll still get it though.
I could file my papers 2 weeks after I retire, I guess I
Right.
think you can do that. It's
Sure.
just, if you want to get your retirement, when you retire, then
Right.
you better have your stuff done in advance.
And they don't want it, I thought it was at least 30 days because they don't want it buried on some desk if you're gonna retire 90 days, if they get it 90 days before your retirement date.
I just want to be like, I mean, someone works here 30 years, 40 years in some cases. I want to help facilitate them, in their retirement, so they don't have to worry like, are they gonna jerk me around with, my time off or whatever. I'd rather just have some sort of guarantee, like, hey, you got this time saved up, you give us enough notice, like, yeah, you're retiring here, but you're gonna be done working here. I guess I don't really see the issue with that.
Or if you, even like if you gave a 60-day notice, we'll give you a month of health insurance or something, I don't know.
Oh, that's problematic. If the carriers figure out that
Oh,
you're
okay.
not actually working, they do a claim sweep and they unpay any claims
Really?
that you incurred.
So you by chance have Joe's suggestion or recommendation with you? Joe Terry's?
So I do, but it's not financed.
Okay.
And part of me thinks different feelings on that. So Joe Terry had recommended that perhaps we would pay out to individuals as they leave. I'm for it in that it gives recognition. To your point, if you've worked here 30 or 40 years, it is a nice recognition. I'm somewhat opposed to it because I'm kind of opposed to the idea that we'd actually have to pay someone to give a notice. So I could go either way on that, I guess. I'm not opposed to giving recognition, and I think recognition is good. It's not financed is my big issue, I guess, and if we assume we have 12 or 20 retirements, I mean, that's $7,500 to $10,000 that the city didn't set aside. That we'd have to figure out where that's coming from.
Well, we have such a gap now, it seems, between when someone leaves and someone gets hired. Couldn't that kind of be built in?
That's what I was just gonna say, is if we, you know, if we request a 60-day notice or whatever, and we give someone $250 or $500, depending upon what that salary level of a person is. You know, for instance, like our current situation where I've had a staff member gone since the first of the year, so we're 3 months, you know, of wages that, but granted, we also have expenses that weren't planned on with doing the recruiting and extra paperwork and everything like that. You know, but there's gotta be some things there in the coffers that aren't being spent or whatever, but.
I don't disagree, but I wouldn't want to speak for Tim. I mean, I'm just not familiar enough with the finances.
Go ahead, Jay.
I have a question and a comment. First of all, I know Shane probably remembers, Sue, you might remember too, but remember when there was a $5,000 incentive was given?
Oh, boy.
Anyways, what's the difference if you're an active employee on insurance or a retiree to the insurance companies on the health insurance, if you stay on the health insurance?
So there's wording in the insurance contract that if you are not an active employee, which means actively at work, they reserve the right to go back and do a clean sweep. Now, if you're a retiree and you're actually on that retiree health plan, that's something entirely different, and they have waivers for that. But they do that so people can't game the system, if you will, and not actively be working for 30 days or 60 days. And I think they do that for subrogation purposes. So let's say you're not working for 30 days and you go boating and you have an accident and, you know, maybe someone else is at fault. They don't want to pay that claim.
But I think but the issue though wouldn't be giving them another month of insurance. It would be paying for what, contributing a month, you know, contributing towards a month of insurance. So I don't know if we would have that issue of, I mean, it's just that we would, I mean, not that we would do this, but how it would play out would simply say that if you give 60 days notice on your last, you know, your first month of retirement insurance, we will pay whatever, so much towards that or something like that. Then I don't think, I mean, obviously they'd have to be on the insurance, but it's more of a contribution issue versus being on, you know, whether or not they're on their insurance. So there probably would be a way to do that, but it might be easier just to give cash if you're gonna be
Yeah,
given cash.
absolutely.
Yeah, just.
And it might be, and you might tie it to years of service too, you know, like someone that's here 3 years and retires, might not get 500, but if, you know, $20 a year or something, so that then it's, you know, more of a recognition type thing versus but.
Because ideally, a 60-day notice would be really nice. Be ideal.
I just sit here and listen to the conversation, and the one thought that goes through my head is, how the heck did we get here? That we have to try to figure out how we can encourage an employee to announce their retirement. I
Exactly what's
understand,
going through my head, has been going through my head.
you know, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. I think there should be something that rests with the employee to say, hey, I want to do what's right here. I'm going to announce my retirement so that they can fill the position in a timely manner. So after I retire, I'm not leaving my department short. It's pretty common sense. The other part of it should be on the city, where we're saying, this employee's been with us for 20, 30, 40 years, they're retiring, let's do what's right by the employee. But, you know, we can't even figure it out. We have 45 minutes in conversation of trying to figure out how we're gonna solve a problem. It's something that's so simple of, I'm gonna retire. I'm gonna go off and enjoy the rest of my life. And it's just really frustrating that we ping pong this and it goes back and forth and we have to figure out a way to incentivize something or disincentivize something and have a penalty. You know, all of us on council here, we have to go back and we have to explain to the taxpayers that we represent why we're spending their money on something. And as the mayor alluded to, we have the police department that's on top of it, that they know when they have people going out or coming in, and they have no problem with it. But yet somewhere else, we have a problem trying to keep track of who's coming, who's going, and then how long of a lag we have to fill a position. You know, we've complained about money. We've done this at council for a long time. We've had to take away the 5% health insurance incentive because health insurance has gone up. We've had to change carriers, and now that seems to be a sticking point that we have to deal with. And you know, what do? I want to do what's right for the employees. I want to give them an incentive to announce their retirement so we're not gumming up the works and holding a position open for months on end. But what's the common sense answer that we go with here? You know, I don't think it's fair that if you have a guy that plays by the rules and then he announces his retirement and he gets his personal days and his floating holidays paid out, and you have the other guy that uses them right away in the beginning of the year, and then he just puts in his 4 weeks of vacation, never comes back, nothing happens to him. That's certainly not fair that one employee is held to an incentive standard, another one isn't. I don't know. But it's just food for thought. I mean, how do we balance this common sense wise? And Joe, I recognize you have a motion on the floor, but I might be inclined to vote against it just because maybe this whole thing needs to be thought out where we come up with something a little tighter and have a incentive and a disincentive so we can bring this back before this committee again and have something that's ironclad that we can say, yes, this works. It's a one size fits all, and it works equally for every department within the city. And with that, I'll quit my rant. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but the bottom line is, it's still the city's problem. It has nothing, the retiree, it's not their issue. 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever, they're out the door. It still falls on the department's problem, and that's what we have to look at addressing is right, wrong, or whatever our opinion is on what a person should morally do to help their fellow, it doesn't matter at that point. They're retiring and they're out the door. So we have to solve this problem from our standpoint on filling that position as soon as possible.
Took the words right out of my mouth. That it's inherent on the city to replace this person. I don't see how you can say, you know, you're gonna penalize necessarily. An incentive for helping us out, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you know, you put in your time, you get yeah. I mean, how is that really? I just don't know how we can put the responsibility on someone who's looking forward to retirement. You know,
And it's not their responsibility.
it's not. No. Yeah. That's the only.
But I agree
problem.
with you.
I look at it through the eyes of if you're the potential employer, say you're running a business, all right? The common practice is if an employee's not happy with their job, they put in a 2-week notice so you have time to recruit for somebody else. I mean, if you get a phone call at 6 o'clock in the morning and somebody says, yep, Joe, you know what, I don't like working for you anymore, I'm not coming in again, that puts you in a position where you're now down an employee.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that employee that just quit on you, just like that, sure, Wisconsin's an employment at will state. The employer or the employee may terminate their employment at any given time. But then that puts you in a tough position that you have to hurry up and find somebody to fill that spot. You know, the right thing to do is, whether you're gonna quit, retire, you should
Give
give
notice.
some sort of notice to your employer that you plan on leaving, so there's an adequate amount of time to fill that position. And that's one of the things that have been discussed at this committee. As a matter of fact, it's why we've undertaken the policy that if a position remains open by the time the HR committee meets, that we're gonna fill it, you know? We've already been down the road where we've had employees here telling us that their department's short-staffed and they wish that the turnaround process was quicker to fill a replacement. Well, we're trying to do something to get an employee to announce their retirement so we can fill these positions quicker, so other people that are still working can take their vacation, so that departments aren't short for 2, 4, 6 months on hand.
And I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Steve. It's just, how do you, what recourse do you have against that person that can just up and quits? I mean, you can't.
There isn't.
Well, but
Yeah.
that's what the majority of policies are though, like Marshfield and Wausau, they take something away. I mean, it's a disincentive, so you don't get paid all your vacation, or you don't if you don't do it. I would say more policies are a disincentive than giving you something, because I think the expectation is you should give that notice.
And I agree, because when I worked at a sheriff's department years ago, you accumulate sick time. If you gave a proper notice, they paid you half of it out. So, but if you didn't get paid out for your sick time that you accrued. But yeah, I still think it's on the employer, you know. And unfortunately, you talk to a business out, they actually have no call, no show, and you're allowed so many no call, no shows before you can get disciplined and fired. So they're already building that into their employees, and that it's something I just cannot fathom, that you can do a no call, no show and still have a job, but it's out there.
My personal opinion is if you announce your retirement, you get your personal days and your floating holidays. If you use them at the beginning of the year and then go on vacation at the end of the year, without not announcing your retirement, you pay back your floating holidays and your personal days. That way there's an incentive for somebody to provide the notice for their retirement. My opinion.
Can you do that?
You could. I mean, we'd have to change probably the language in the granting of those benefits.
And how many days a year is that? How many?
So DPW 3 personal days and 2 floating holidays.
Okay, so that's fine.
Admin staff, and non-union staff 5 personal days and 2 floating holidays.
Okay.
So 5 or 7.
5 or 7, okay.
Okay, if there's gonna be, I guess, legal issues or terminology issues, then why don't I just amend the motion then to just strictly to, maybe eliminating that language that says if you announce your retirement date, you can't use these days, and then if we wanna figure out how we're gonna incentivize or disincentivize for announcing retirement, maybe we can do that separate or something.
Well, can I throw something out on the table and you can tell me if it's reasonable?
Okay.
What if we would say you give a 30-day notice? If you do not give at least a 30-day notice, your first month of retiree health insurance, you pay. That way, I think that we would have incentive for people to give their 30 days. Depending on what group you fall into, some people have more of a contribution than others. But I think that would provide incentive for people to say, I want that first month's contribution, so I'm going to give that 30 days. Again, I'm throwing it out. I've never had this issue anywhere I worked. We always had very strict policies, and if you didn't give it, you just didn't get your vacation.
What if you don't not on the health insurance?
Well, that's rare, but
To your point, actually, if I don't give a 2-week notice, I don't get my vacation paid out.
You don't?
Like where I work, that's what it says, yeah, so, and I was like, well, what if you have like 5 weeks or something, you know, so, but. I think we went backwards.
I don't see that as being unreasonable, though, you know, that if you give a notice, you get your vacation paid out. If you don't give the notice, you don't. I don't think that's unreasonable.
I would just like to know what the policy is.
Right.
If you want to retire.
Just tell me what.
Well, I mean, it's something,
Yeah.
I mean, these are all things you have to think about, but
Mm.
Should we just wait until, I mean, we had a lot of discussions and I think came up with some ideas there. Should we just, I don't want to table it, but we've had a lot of discussion. Should we discuss this next month? And come up with a final,
Maybe come up with a disincentive
plan.
option and an incentive
yeah,
option. and
right.
You can decide whether it's something that should be
menu
rewarded
from-
for or something that should be taken away from
Yeah,
them.
a menu from which we could check, we could choose. I mean, there's a lot of just discussion back and forth and this and that, but seeing something in black and white, we can do this, we can do this, and then meld them together as to what it would.
You did make a motion that, no, did you withdraw your first motion, Joe?
I will. Can you just withdraw a motion? But,
Just, yeah, ask for unanimous consent to let the
You'd
motion
ask
withdraw.
for consent for Alderman Zerflu to withdraw his motion? Aye,
I,
okay.
and then the only thing I was gonna comment on is maybe like, you know, to me, what this recommendation is kind of simple. I mean, I don't wanna, I'm just
Complicated,
yeah, that's kind of what we, every time we bring it up, it's just,
That's why
You know.
I like your vacation idea more and more.
maybe Sue or Dawn can come up with language or something that'll work.
There's problems with that because it's earned. And we're not on a system that you just give the vacation the 1st of January. What we're earning today
Yep.
in 2019
Mhm.
is for 2020. And that's the way that the vacation was designed.
Say we have like this real time thing or whatever, so I don't know
So
how that's
I would
different.
prefer real time, but that's not the system that
Okay.
I've inherited. So you can't take a benefit or cause people not to get a benefit that they earned in a prior year. That's the problem with
okay.
that. That's the legal issue with that. I like it better when you earn per payday or you earn as you go, but that's
Mhm.
not what we have today.
But that actually might be something maybe that we go to with the new, maybe. I don't know.
Problematic.
It'll be, yeah, there'll be that reconciliation of everybody.
Well, there's a
kind of
huge
getting-
liability then,
Yeah.
no matter what you do. Or you let people go with inflated balances for 2 years.
So maybe that's a moot point then.
I do like Scott's idea, just not take action on it this time and just
Mhm.
let's revisit it next month and come up with something that's where we can incentivize or disincentivize it and have something that works instead of shooting from the hip today
Yeah.
to try to get it right.
I don't have a problem with that. This is at least, I think, the third time we've
Right.
discussed it, but, I mean, you're right, it's getting more complicated, I think, every time we talk about it.
All right, so I'll make a motion to discuss this item at the next HR committee meeting.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. All right. Discussion, approval to create an IT lead position, including job description and pay grade. The Common Council directed this item to the HR committee. Dawn?
So in our packets, we have a job description. It's a draft job description entitled IT Manager. I just wanted to briefly touch on some of the changes. So this was directed by the council to revise this position into some type of a lead position. What we did, we took out some of the normal director responsibilities, anything around strategies or providing greater direction has been removed from this. We did call it an IT manager. There's a couple of reasons for that, actually. The first one being that if individuals go out to Indeed or Career Builder and search, they're probably going to look for IT manager or IT director. They're probably not going to look for an IT support lead or an IT operations lead, so it would be hard to get that type of job title if you're searching that. The other reason, structurally, we do have IT overseeing IT employees, GIS coordinator, as well as the community media area. So if we don't have that, we have 6 or 7 employees that have really no direct supervisor. So I did want to maintain some type of a management role here, so those individuals do have a manager to whom they can report. You'll notice that this person does assume responsibility for help desk tickets, the IT budget. Basically this was turned into more of a lead position. The pay grade, and I would have to pend the pay grade on this, I do not yet have the formal job back from, we use Archer, a third-party consultant. I do not yet have that. For now, I have it assigned into a pay grade 16, based on information I have from Marshfield, Stevens Point, and from Wood County. Pay grade 16 would be $73,501 through $83,161. I feel that what we're going to get back from Archer will be in line with that. But if we want to accept this, I would think that we would probably want to have some type of contingency on that aligning with Archer. So we know that we have this and it's been evaluated and we have it in the right pay range.
For discussion?
I was just, at one time, we, in the media, community media, we had 3 employees. Tom was there. And now we have 2, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So can they cover, first of all, why is this person, I guess I want to use the word supervising or that
Sure.
department, and are we short that department? I mean, here they're taking, we have multiple meetings, we have multiple, taping of that and so forth, and going out and see other programs. Do we have enough people in that department, or why can't that department be by itself? I don't know.
So historically, we've had it under IT, and I shouldn't say historically since I've been here, they've had that under IT. I do think they have some overlapping responsibilities. I'll use help desk. So you submit a help desk ticket. What is it for? If it's, I can't get my computer going, my device is locked up, that's an IT. Maybe it's for, I have an HR committee meeting on this day and I need coverage. So that's multimedia, that's that department. So there are some overlapping areas. Website maintenance is another one. So maybe one part of that is a little bit more technical that an IT person would do. Maybe the other side of that is graphics or marketing that multimedia would do. So I'm thinking the reasoning here is that there is some overlap with those 2 departments, and they do work together.
We are filling the multimedia coordinator.
Yes.
position.
Oh, we are?
Yes, we are.
It's actually on your list as a vacancy, and that we are
Just saw
actually in the
that.
process
Oh.
of screening candidates for.
Yes.
Okay, that's what
The
I was,
deadline
I
for
was
applications
really
was
sure.
a couple weeks ago, or a
Correct.
month ago or so.
Go ahead, Shane.
I agree with Scott, because that position is, well, as Sue remembers, there was there was an advisory commission that oversaw them, and then, I too don't understand why it's not its own department, a standalone department, as it has been in the past. Now website design, those things are things that have been put in that department, I believe, recently, and so that's why you have that overlap, and the department has changed also in their function within the city. So yeah, I think it's gotten messy, and I personally, and maybe it's a discussion, I liked back when there were more programming and football games and those type of things, and they're very, very strong volunteer. It ran, and I think it's less than that. It's changed that the whole River Cities Access seemed to have changed more into a city function for the city's use for information and those type of things. And I agree. For me, it makes more sense that it was its own department, but it has changed over the last several years on the role that they've played.
I used to take for them when they were
What's that?
Pac 4.
Yeah,
Yep, I used to.
and
Was
we
it
had
high
a lot of
school?
volunteers back in that day.
Zach, do you have anything on this?
You know, the directive was of the commission, or the committee, and I think of the council, was to make it less of a director and make it more of a working lead. And I think from a recruitment standpoint, manager, and I was just looking at Ladders and Glassdoor and, you know, all these other recruitment sites, and operations leads seem to speak more to like administration and not to IT. And so I think from a recruitment standpoint, titles matter. I don't know, many of us probably not as much, but I think in terms of recruitment it does. So I'm hopeful that this addresses the concerns, and I think it gets to the meat of what we need to do in terms of our workload. To address the separation of departments, I mean, you'll decide what you want. At the end of the day, they report to me, and part of why I wanted I wanted some more collaboration between IT and community media. That is essential. If you ask the folks at community media, they're so much more IT focused than they are TV, and public access is much more than just running a TV station. It's so much more social media and website and just online communication that I think IT lends itself to greater collaboration. They're small departments, so I think there always needs to be a cross-training and overlap, and I think that's gone well so far. I think it's been neat to see the GIS coordinator, the network technician or help desk technician, as well as community media all working together to solve problems. So I think it makes sense for them to report to one person. Now, not to say that they don't all manage and you know, interact with me and other department heads without having to go through their supervisor. I mean, it's fairly informal in terms of chain of command sometimes. So I just feel like it makes the most sense for one person to supervise those responsibilities. I have to excuse myself to get to a meeting, so have a nice weekend, everybody.
Yeah, and like he said, I don't necessarily have that a problem, but you know, who decides that role of what we want our CCA to be? You know, do we want it more heavy on city media, or do we want it more in programming? You know, I guess that's ultimately maybe a council decision and a viewer decision. You know, what does the viewer want to see? Do they want to see church and football games, or do they want to see commercials about the city? That's a good question for the media people.
Both.
I think it's planned, yeah. Because as a citizen, you may not know what's happening in the city. And that's one way of educating. But yet, you know, if I'm in high school, I want to see the football game, I want to see the, so it's that blend.
Yeah, finding a balancing of a blend of that.
I know that they're going to recruit for Tom's position, and I think that the programming on RCCA will probably be with the director. I guess we'll kind of look at this position and see if anyone agrees or disagrees with it. Any thoughts on it?
I really don't have a problem with it.
Unfortunately, I'm sorry, when I got this time, I didn't have a good chance to review it, but my first run over it looked pretty good.
Okay.
And that's what I think we eventually had talked about, is we wanted more of a person that's gonna roll up their sleeves and do help desk tickets and him to help with those. The only concern I think I have, and could be, is in the qualifications, because a lot of IT people aren't college graduates. You know, a lot of these people are self-taught.
Or associate degrees.
Or even, not even that, you know. I think of our previous IT person, you know, he doesn't have any education in it. So that's a unique field where you don't need to get a college degree to be well-versed in these areas. So my only concern would be with it requiring a college education in a degree in a computer science related field. Are we maybe excluding a part of a group that might be very knowledgeable? I don't know.
And yeah, I guess. And you are requiring an actual undergraduate degree, so.
I think in my own opinion, I went to Mid-State, and I know Mid-State does have the computer programs, but I'm also looking at what we're paying the position. You know, we've just identified that this is a $73,000 to $83,000 a year position, which for somebody that's just getting out of school with a bachelor's degree would,
Salary dependent upon qualifications.
Yeah.
If they have a bachelor's degree, pay them that. If they don't, I guess, bring it down and pay it or whatever.
Or put in there something like a bachelor's degree or work-related experience or something along those lines maybe, or?
We can add qualifying language that would say something like, may consider extensive relevant IT work experience and or formal
I just don't want to
training.
see it exclude a segment of the population that might be
Right.
qualified in it. Because like I said, it's a unique field that you could have very strong skills being self-taught in it versus other job areas.
Yeah.
I've seen it go both ways
Right,
in
yeah.
IT. I really have. Either there are those exceptions where people are very, very bright and they're self-taught. There's other individuals where they walk in and they claim they're self-taught and wow.
Yeah, make a bigger umbrella to get the best candidate. Because
Unplug it and wait a minute, plug it back.
Your face.
Ultimately, you know, but yeah, or at least, you know, hopefully through an interviewing panel, you could kind of get those people that think they're self-knowledge that aren't kind of weeded out, but I just don't want to see us exclude some people that might have a lot of knowledge but not have a college degree.
Right.
so do we want to change the pay to be dependent upon experience?
I mean, I think it is anyway. I think that's implied in most
Okay.
job descriptions. So if they don't
I think
have
yeah.
all of those qualifications, you would place them on a little bit lower on that scale.
Until they get them.
But I think you're also paying them for the responsibility of the position.
Well, yeah, and that's why you wouldn't drop them. Yeah, like
No, I mean,
from a
you'd
16 to a.
stay within the range.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're gonna change bachelor's to.
I'm gonna add language that will say, may consider relevant IT work
Right.
experience
Yeah.
and or formal training in lieu of.
Right,
It's easy enough to add
Sure.
that language.
right, good.
Maybe get more applicants.
So, yeah, potentially.
Okay. And I know Dawn had asked us to mention about the pay range with Archer, I believe you said it was.
Make it contingent on that. I just want to make sure that everything lines up well and I'm not over or under valuing the position. I just don't have it back yet.
Okay. So I would make a motion to approve the IT manager position with salary contingent on human resources, checking that against Archer. Also with the proposed language change and education requirements.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion on this item? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried. Item number 5 is our standing item agenda, which is current city job openings. And with that, I'll go to Dawn.
Sure, and what I did, I just basically listed these. We have been in interviews the last couple weeks for both the GIS coordinator and the multimedia coordinator. I know the IT intern we've also had interviews on. We do not have as many applicants as I would hope for the senior city inspector. We knew that going in, so I think that we may have to meet again with Adam and have some other alternatives that we throw on the table. Again, I just want to remind everyone that all of our positions are listed out on our city website, and that's really basically all we have for recruiting.
Okay, thank you, Dawn. Item number 6 is, oh,
Do we have any positions that are vacant that we're not actively recruiting for at all?
No, we have seasonal that we're recruiting for and LTEs that we're recruiting for. Not that I'm aware of.
Then we're just waiting for all that, the shifting at city garage.
The filter down.
Yeah, the filter down, okay.
Yeah.
all right. Item number 6, discussion approval for changes to the city's current merit pay provision of the pay provision policies. Dawn?
Yes, so this is the last attachment in your packet under pay provision policy. And I highlighted, it's on page 4 of this, it's 11B. I simply took the language that came out of our last HR committee and council meeting and incorporated it into this policy. Basically, the council had decided that they wanted to change that scope and the criteria. So what I did is I took the language from that motion and copied it into the policy.
Great. For any other discussion?
I don't think we need any.
No, I think you incorporated everything.
All right. Then I will make a motion to accept the pay provision policy, section 11, para B, as presented in our packet.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, committee will vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Let's put the bid.
All right. We have to set a next meeting date. I did have some communication from Dawn yesterday that we do have some stuff coming up with union contracts that we do require a meeting. I think we were looking at Monday at 2 o'clock. So, all right, so our next HR committee meeting will be Monday, March 11th at 2 p.m.
We might sign that
for next
for
month.
the regular,
For
yeah.
the regular. All right, we're gonna have probably one more right after the election. The election's on Tuesday. I think they'd have the last council meeting on the 9th. But what about,
16th.
huh?
The 16th is when old council ends, new council takes over, right?
No, they don't do it on the same day
Yeah, you
anymore.
can't have the old
Okay.
council, can't meet after the third.
16th would be third Tuesday though, so.
Third Tuesday is when the new council would get sworn
I
in.
think that's the last one of the old council, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sue, isn't it? That way?
Well, we had this discussion the last time that you can't, on the third Tuesday at midnight, that's when the new council takes over, so you couldn't have an old council and a new council. That was according to the league. So then we just did, well, the March meeting was the last meeting of the old, and then the April meeting was the new, but then there was the standing committee meetings at the beginning of April, and I think that Tom brought up that, well, shouldn't the old council dispose of those things? So you'd have to have, if you want to have an old council meeting before April 16th,
Should be the
and then you'd have another, then you'd
Okay.
have to have one on the third Tuesday for the new. So I don't know how, maybe the clerk can send something out on that if you want to wrap up the old council before, like in the second week of April maybe, or,
That's why I didn't fill my book in yet.
you what?
That's why I didn't fill my book in yet, but we're doing. I'm waiting.
So I don't know if there's going to be an old council meeting the second week in April to resolve everything? Or should we do a
Well,
poll on that, or?
I guess if we don't know,
I guess we'll, well, I
should we
guess.
set our meeting then?
We could at the March council meeting, we can talk about that, I
Okay.
guess. That's right.
So-
Well, that'll be on March 19th, and then you can
Okay.
decide what you want to do then, I guess.
I'm just thinking Friday, April 5th, like we've been doing first Friday of the month. I think you're off that Friday, Joe.
I am.
So,
I had to look, I'm not sure how you know that.
because my old schedule from where I used to work
Oh,
is
yeah.
dependent on my child placement.
You got a good memory.
Do we just want to keep doing it at the same time, 1 o'clock?
Sure.
All right, so our next regular meeting will be April 5th, 2019 at 1 p.m. All right, next item is adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and second to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we stand adjourned at 250 per